Okay, so yeah, it's a little after 7, and I think we have 6 voting members here. That's a quorum, so let's call this meeting to order and kick it off. This is a meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Thanks. It's just after 7 o'clock on Thursday, January 28 of 2016. Happy New Year. Thanks for coming out on a cold night, or coldish night, to look at the Bike Master Plan, which is, as you probably saw, a huge, long document, but tonight we'll take some discussion and questions about it. First off, let's start with a roll call.
Brandon Marisax-Johnson.
Good evening. Here.
James Radel.
Here.
Michelle Guerrera. Elsie Hedgepeth. Here. Cynthia Hoyle. Audrey Ishii. Susan Jones. Here. Jeff Marino.
Here.
Craig Schunkweiler.
Here.
Okay, great. And yeah, welcome aboard to some new faces. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, afterwards, I mean, if you have any questions about format, staff can always help answer things, and everybody here's a pretty friendly bunch, so thanks. And we do have a couple vacancies. So I think we're still looking for one more at-large member. So if you know any other people in the community who want to work on bike and ped safety issues, and then also an Urbana School District representative. Usually we like to find somebody who works in the schools as a teacher or works with the district, and they can kind of check with the district to get the district office's blessing that they would sort of be the official connection here. So if you know anybody who's a teacher, works in the schools, and works on walking, biking, safety for kids, please spread the word. And staff can answer any questions always about how you fill out the application form and get appointed.
Right. Excuse me. Brandon, you want to let them know that the vacancy is because Carrie Brown Tess has, she's actually seeking her doctorate, so she has other pressing items.
Yeah, that keeps her busy enough, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's go on to approval of tonight's agenda. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda as
of that. And then seeking feedback from probably a steering committee that's yet to be determined, and then also BPAC. Probably the biggest challenge is funding. Is right now to start, at least an initial start. The main concern is, we have to look into the future after we've installed these over a series of years, and then we have to replace those, and it's replacement costs and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's one thing, anybody can go and just start plopping signs down, but we really want to plan it out and make it a nice amenity.
Yeah. Okay, great. Any other comments or questions particular to the green loop map here? Okay.
I think one of the items that has come up repeatedly in the past is the removal of on-street parking for bike lanes. And I think Brandon had asked a very good question at our joint commission meeting, which was concerning what's left to be removed. Because as we know it's a very contentious type of item. The good news is the yeoman's efforts has already been done, mostly within the last, between the first plan and this plan. That's really the good news. What's left to do are just a few segments that I just thought I'd highlight. And I think this is a good time that, since our meetings are public meetings, that these kind of are brought out. That only happens when I'm talking. Yeah, a little cold. So one of the areas that will be coming up probably this spring is Green Street from Busey to Ray Street. And that's actually part of the MCOR Project 5 street there. That street has currently parking on the north side of the street. And the plan would be to remove that parking and install bike lanes. The width of that road will not change, but the pavement system will be removed probably somewhere around 2018. That's the tentative timeline, and replaced in entirety with new bike lanes, same width and everything, but a complete new pavement system. My staff it was about a year ago in February, we did a parking study. So we inventoried the parking for a week at 4 different periods of time during the day and in the evening. And generally what we found there was, and I'll be reporting on this later to the Traffic Commission, is that most of the people that are using those spaces are commuter parkers for the university. They weren't necessarily residents along the street. We determined that by seeing that late at night or early in the morning those cars were not there, but during the day when classes were in session, their cars were there. We've also been in touch with 2 of the churches along the street there, so we've already had dialogue with them about the removal of the parking. And but when I say this, the caveat on that is, you never really know how it's going to turn out until you give a notice and you say that you are in fact going to remove it. One of the things that came forward with the Traffic Commission when we discussed this is that we all, I'm a member of the Traffic Commission as well, we jointly agreed that when we reviewed this plan that we would change our method of notification. So instead of, previously we would notify 1 week in advance of the meeting, we are now increasing that 1 additional week so that there's at least enough lead time for people to know about it. Staff has and will be continuing to talk with people or residents in advance, but that's really the only major one left. The 2 other locations are Amber Lane, which is down by Meyer, but that section is identified as a on-street parking removal, but there is no parking on the south side of the road, and on the north side of the road, there's currently really not enough space to park anyway. So really, there's nobody parking there. And that's actually runs from Philo over to Myra Ridge. I'd like to put bike lanes on that sooner than later. There's just, the pavement has faulted, meaning the slabs have shifted. So we make it a policy internally that we only put bike lanes on roads that are prepared to receive bike lanes, just so that they're geared for success instead of just marking them on a road. So we have some pavement issues there we have to resolve before we put those on there. The last piece is Oregon, which is west of Cranert. So it runs between Matthews and Goodwin there. And right now, it's a one-way street, and there is and identified in the in the master plan as a contraflow bike lane, which means it would be against the direction of traffic, and then there would be some parking removed, but it's also identified as a study area. So we'd have to study that one. That one could be a little bit difficult to implement, but we'd have to do that, again, in conjunction with resurfacing the road. But really, there's only 3 of those left, and I think the authors, Gabe Lewis, did a very good job, and we had planning involved in engineering, and we it's not very popular to remove parking, and when it does happen, it actually creates a lot of animosity towards the bicycling community, and that's not something that we all want. So there were some areas that were kind of identified as short-term, you don't remove it, long-term we do remove it. We've kind of removed those from the plan. And keep in mind that in 5 years, maybe things change and we have to seek areas out. But right now, this is all that we have.
Any questions or comments about the parking removal stuff? Okay. Any other things you wanted to highlight, Craig?
Yeah, I had been in contact with Gabe Lewis, who is the plan author, and asked him the status of the public comments. So I thought I'd just run over a couple, just generally what's been received to date. And actually, there's only been a few comments to date, and I do feel that we did a fairly proactive approach of getting the information out there. Keep in mind too, there were several public workshops over a year ago that the public could come to comment. But so far, and I'll just talk in general, one commenter mentioned about nature trails and basically whether or not some of those nature trail in the specifics of the maps in the park should be removed from the master plan, meaning that the master plan is a connecting piece from park to park, but not maybe show all the details within the parks. So that's just something we got to talk about with Gabe. Nothing really big on there. There was a comment, the second commenter talked about more maintenance of the existing bikeways. There was note about broken glass. There was note about particularly South Ray Street, south of Florida, being maybe in not the best condition as far as potholes and things like that. We take that information on my side in Public Works, and I just want you to know that we do run street sweepers through, but we have over 140 miles of centerline miles of streets. So the street sweepers, and we've had actually 2 of them that run all the time. The best thing that the public can do is if they just notify Public Works of those areas, or if bicyclists are out and they see broken glass or anything like that, because we can't always get to everything, but if we know about it, we will go out and send them out to those locations to take care of those issues. As far as the potholes, it is a challenge. We will fill the potholes, but as far as repairing the road, it really comes down to funding. And as an example, we're going to be doing some concrete patching on Florida from Philo to Thomas Paine down in that area this year. There are bike lanes there. That road's not in the best condition. South Race, we'd love to do that. We have a shortage of money. But we're fully aware of it, and we do try to keep the bike lanes in the best condition we The third commenter was more about, the person didn't feel that painted bike lanes were safe. What they really wanted was some type of buffer between the vehicle traffic and the bike lane. So I think that's something that maybe we can talk about a little bit more. We've talked about that some with the Bradley Avenue improvement that will be coming to you guys here in a month or two, where I had sought out, we're looking at a buffer space in there between the vehicles and the bike lane. On a case-by-case basis, we will seek those out if we have the space to do so when we design bike lanes. Sometimes they're mentioned in the master plan. A lot of times we just don't have the space, and we make it a policy our goal is not to go and widen roads for bike lanes. We try to basically reallocate space that's there, and if we can, we will try to implement those in. But sometimes we can't do that. A Cadillac design would be the MCOR project design on campus. That design will have a raised bike lane. That's the best that you could ever get. That's a very expensive project, and we would love to do those type of projects, but can't always do that. But I guess one thing that, and I do most of the bike lane design in the city, is that something? And we talk about the 60%. Is that something that we are hearing from people? They'd like to have separation. I'm hearing that more and more. Or we also have the commuter bikes that they don't necessarily see that so much as what I hear, that they need to have that. But I thought maybe we could open that up for discussion.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't a bike lane too, it could be Sharrows or something different, right? So,
Right.
Yeah. What are people's thoughts on that comment about, well, these bike lanes aren't safe, or I'm too close to cars?
I feel like, they're like half of the 60% really wouldn't be happy unless it's really separate and, these bad, but there's another healthy half of the 60% who would be perfectly willing to ride down the street, especially like a street like Anderson, where really, especially, and that's one of those things where the more bicycles are out there, the more comfortable people feel. It'd be great if we could have, great buffered bike lanes like in DC, but we're not DC.
Other thoughts?
I agree with Sue on the bike lanes, mixed feelings from people. But one of the issues with the protected bike lanes is intersections. And there's some designs that help with that, some that aren't very good. But I think that bike lanes are, the unprotected bike lanes are our best bet, because we have a lot of infrastructure issues with plowing and repairs. I mean, you guys know more about that than I do, how hard it is to have like a separate snow plow. That's just a lot of work for you guys. But I think one of the issues people have with the bike lanes is they're on the side of the road, there's debris, there's potholes. Mentioning South Race Street, a good friend of mine actually broke a wheel, hit a curve. They're going really fast on a racing bike with their tires, and broke their wheel. And that's the reality of the roadway. If we had $1 million, we could fix all that stuff. But I think if we could improve the widths as well as the quality of the pavement, that would have a bigger effect than protection. Because if you take a smooth street with 40 to 60 inch bike lane, people feel good. The newer designs that we've got, like on campus on 6th Street, between Armory and Peabody, are really nice. People love those. I like it. It's got a nice wide bike lane. You can ride to the leftmost of the bike lane, so you're out of the door zone. The buses have enough room to pass you without an issue, and I see a lot of people getting off the sidewalk to get onto that bike lane, and then actually switching back to the sidewalk. So,
Mm-hmm.
James, on 6th Street, and I'm sort of familiar with it, there is parking then along, on-street, along that section?
There is. Sixth Street's a little weird because you've got a one-way that turns into a two-way.
Mhm.
There is car parking on the west side of the street. And then for, I guess, this section with the bike lane, it's on the west side only.
Mhm. Those are all good points, and I certainly appreciate that. I think I try to stress when we design, and we do, like I said, most of ours in-house, and we sometimes hire consultants, but one of the phrases that I use all the time is designing for success, meaning that we want to do it in a really good manner to basically encourage the success of the project. Sometimes we get people want things quick, but we do take our time and really think it out. When we do road diets, we actually run simulation models. We will hire, in our case, it's a regional plan commission. They have the software to actually run simulation models, and one of the reasons that we do that is because it's relatively easy just to stripe bike lanes, but if it becomes a problem with the cars, then that creates we talk about this adversarial approach, and we don't want that. But what we've largely found is we have an overbuilt road network, and we saw that, west of Lincoln Square as an example. That road was a 4-lane road, and now we've, dedicated space for bikes, but that was analyzed, with this software. And then same thing with Illinois, south of Lincoln Square that'll be a planned project in the future too, where we could look at maybe buffered bike lanes. But my point is, when it's designed well, you really shouldn't notice it. It should, and then, hopefully it even feels right, but when it's not right, you definitely know it's not right. And I would always encourage the public to give us feedback, because we're always trying to get better. Because really, bicycle infrastructure design is what I always say is in its relative infancy. Cars have been around for quite a while, and we've got that figured out. But bicycle things, with all these different manuals, things are constantly changing, and new treatments are coming out. So we're just always trying to get better. So.
I would ask that, don't forget about the greenway. Like my block on Anderson would be great to just make, bicycles and pedestrians a priority.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I'm thinking that, kind of what you were saying about the hazards at intersections, that some of those people that really want a separate facility don't realize how, unless they're really well-designed and the infrastructure lends it to us, they only feel safer. And the worst thing to do would be to have a bunch of people out on, the side paths with the conflicts, and then have wrecks and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That wouldn't be success.
Right. So really, that was the only 3 major comments. I think the plan has been out on Facebook, but it's received, I wouldn't call those comments necessarily constructive that I've seen. So.
Hey, you mentioned that you're doing raised bike lanes as part of the MCOR project. Can you elaborate on what, is that just like a ramped up from the street level?
Mm-hmm. Basically, it's ramped up a couple inches.
So a car could roll over the ramp,
Yeah.
but it is a visual cue to the car that's for bikes, not for automobiles.
That's correct. And the curb is actually a mountable curb. And it could also be transferred. Bicyclists can run over that and back and forth if they have to. What they found, our consultants found, there's this item called level of stress. And in this bike plan, we have bicycle level of service, but there's a movement afoot to go to level of stress. And it basically, studies have shown that when bicyclists are sort of elevated up and have their dedicated space, that they feel more comfortable.
Right.
and their motorists see them just a little bit better. It's not so pronounced. I'm trying to visualize this, but it's not so pronounced that that they're fully elevated. But this will be really something completely new to our area. In Public Works, our primarily concerned with snow removal of those. So it's been designed in a way, and it's actually pitched at the same slope as the road. So it's set up so that plows can work and go across that space. So it's, and they have these up in the northern regions of the United States too. So they can plow up there, we can plow down here, right? Figure out a way.
What kind of aspects do we have for enforcement? Because one of the things that I've found is the animosity. And I feel the only thing to really conquer that is going to be education. You know, the motorists need to learn. They've got 99% of the infrastructure. Then give us a little right. But parking in bike lanes, we really don't have any enforcement on that. A lot of people get harassed by bus drivers and motorists. What kind of ideas have we got? Because a lot of times when that happens, you can't get a license plate. The motorist is gone. And if you do, we don't have a lot of ordinances to deal with that. And you get a couple of, bad interactions, and you're off the bike. And you've officially been kind of forced out of that.
That's a good question, and I'm not a police officer, and I handle the infrastructure component of it. So I'll just be straight with you. I don't have a direct answer unless Kevin's got some ideas here too. But I will tell you it's something that I do recall there was a section mentioned about enforcement. I think, in all due respect, the best answer would be for us to report back at the next meeting. Again, this one today, we don't have to take action on the plan. We'll have another meeting in February, but unless Kevin's got some thoughts.
No, I don't have any thoughts right now, but to be honest with you, I probably read this draft a few months ago. I mean, not the most recent draft, so I should probably brush up on it before the next meeting. But we could certainly look in there and see what kind of enforcement and education we're talking about.
I did see in the plan that there's a section on education and talked about incorporating more bicycle training into driver's ed classes. And so I guess the city would work with the high schools to, and I guess it's not even the high schools that teach driver's ed anymore, it's the private companies, but work with them to incorporate more education for how cars interact with bicycles as part of that. And then also there was a section with the education that talked about trying to incorporate more training at the grade school level for kids that are even earlier than that. So I guess that would be a good implementation goal.
Yeah.
But I don't recall about the enforcement part of it.
Yeah, Craig, I think it's worth looking into. I just pulled up the enforcement section because there is, page 287. Some stuff about enforcement, in both enforcing bicyclist violations, like wrong way riding or something that we're saying officers should ticket that if a bike is going the wrong way down the street. And also a section about enforcing motorist violations. But we actually don't list some of those specifics, like motorists parked in a bike lane that are, or just like harassment, harassment of cyclists and the 3 foot passing distance law that I think are worth a mention in there, because those are the things that really take public education. Most people don't know maybe about that 3 foot law, and yeah, we certainly want to be clear that you can't park in the bike lanes, and people can call the police and they'll tow you out of there and ticket the offending motorist, and that's the kind of stuff we should be talking about and then enforcing.
So I might be wrong in this, but Illinois state law has no ordinance or code against parking in bike lanes. And I was speaking with Officer Hawk about this recently, and it actually requires you to move to the side. I don't know about Urbana city ordinance, and this is something might be a personal project of mine, but I believe the city would have to enact an ordinance to require people not to park in bike lanes, if they haven't already.
We'll certainly check into that, but I think it's been our understanding when we've talked to the police department in the past that it is illegal to park in bike lanes.
Okay.
And that there have been citations. Yeah, we can check into that, but I don't know if it's a city ordinance, but I'm understanding that they have cited in the past and had told us that it was illegal to park in bike lanes.
Yeah, can I chime in here for a sec? I've talked to our parking enforcement people, and they will ticket people parked in bike lanes. But I don't know if that's just something they do or if there's actually a rule against that. But, you know, like the issue with street sweeping, I think, you know, we only have a couple of people doing parking enforcement, so they're unfortunately probably not going to get everybody who's parked in a bike lane, because there's only so much area they can cover.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you can check on that and just confirm.
Yeah, I'll
some
talk
of that.
to Gabe about the enforcement as well, and the education component. I know, talking with the police department, there is, we have this bikes may use full lane signs. So I will be straight with you. There have been concerns from the police officers about use of those signs, and their preference is to not have those signs. And one of the reasons is they have had run-ins with individuals that are on bicycles that have rode in the middle of the road at 2 to 3 mile an hour and have not moved for vehicles. And that's when there's been complaints, and there's been some bad situations that have come up. So they've called engineering and said, why are you putting these signs up?
Right.
So we're on the flip side of that too.
Mm-hmm.
And really, when you get down to it, it's kind of like, the whole, why can't we all get along? And as long as we're functioning, the bicyclist is actually riding at a bicycle speed, regular speed. And then if a motorist is not, one of the reasons to have the full lane sign is because of this passing issue and it not being safe, and it's too tight. And what I told the police officer is that we only put those signs in when we don't have enough space to do the passing. So one rule of thumb is 14 feet. So if we're less than 14 feet, the rule would be 11 foot of vehicle space, 3 foot for the bicycles, that's 14. But if we're less than that, and a lot of our roads are 11 foot wide, boom, then we put those up. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense for us from an engineering standpoint. But if we have bicyclists that are abusing those, then that doesn't help the situation either.
Yeah.
So it's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions on any of it?
I do have another
Yeah,
question.
Jeff.
Was there an executive summary? It was with over 300 pages. I was wondering if they could pull out 20 pages and just have the highlights that somebody, a layperson could pick up, or if they're surfing the net, get to the city's website and they're looking at it, they can just look at that 20-page document and get a good gist of what the plan is proposing. And then, some of the other stuff, if they want to drill down, could go to the full document, but it could give somebody a quick overview of what the city of Urbana is all about in regards to advancing their bicycle goals without having to go through all 300 pages.
Mm-hmm.
There is not an executive summary,
There's definitely not.
but I think that's a really good recommendation. We've talked about it internally. I think that's something that we should pursue. We are the funding on this project is already exceeded its allotment.
I was gonna say, you got a lot of bang for your buck on that.
But I think that's probably the biggest single thing that, it's so voluminous.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good plan. It provides a lot of direction, but it would be good to be able to see it in a snapshot, so I think that's worthwhile.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we should pursue.
Yeah.
Does everybody else agree with that, too? Yeah. So we'll move that up.
Okay. Good. Good suggestion. Another part of the plan I wanted to just bring up briefly was bike boulevards. That's the other than the green loop concept, the bike boulevard concept is probably the biggest new concept in this plan that wasn't in the prior. And I think the only location identified for it is a little strip of West Main Street, maybe Goodwin to Harvey or
Right.
something, over there kind of near campus.
Right, east of the Seville Center, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is kind of a short piece and also kind of not a lot of residential housing or whatever, it doesn't quite test it out totally in a neighborhood setting. So I guess my question is does that location make sense to people, and are there any others we're missing out as a city, other spots in residential neighborhoods that really make a good test case for a bike boulevard? I think it still remains to be seen. Will people understand it? Does it make sense? Will people know how to use it safely? Because it's a treatment that we don't have elsewhere in Urbana. But that one spot, if it's the only one, it doesn't test out all of that hypotheses of like, does this work in a slow residential neighborhood, even though that is a nice connection over there towards campus. So I don't know, what did people think of bike boulevards, and are there places where?
Well, I'm really curious about them, but there's so many things, you don't want to just experiment.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying that, my stretch of Anderson, of course, I think it would be great because
Yeah.
I live there, but I don't know about things like what does parking have to do with it? Because there's a lot of people do park on that road, and so that's why cars have to wait at one end of the block or the other, because there really isn't room for two cars. And I was kind of thinking that almost makes it better. I mean, if they're used to doing that anyway, then if they had to do that because of the way bike boulevards were, but I also kind of like calling them greenways instead because of the animosity factor. I mean, I know that back in the 70s, there was a stretch, they made a road so cars couldn't get through, and it created a lot of hostility. And I like these because, no, you can still drive through if that's where you live, but you're going to be going slow. But what are the factors that make a place work with for a greenway bike boulevard?
In October, I was in Guadalajara, Mexico, and they had a lot of bike boulevards. And it was interesting because I didn't realize what was going on. I noticed something was weird because on one street, people were wandering around, talking, picking fruit, just having a good time. Bikes were just cruising. And bicyclists, people going 2 miles an hour in the middle of the road, and somebody be behind them, and they're like, all right, no big deal. The next street over, it was a breakneck pace, no room really for bikes. And I started asking, and I found out that they do bike boulevards. And it's on a east-west, north-south. They have a grid where they alternate. And then they paint sections of the road green. And so there are whole places where everybody slows down, and they're like, this is a family area, pedestrians, take your dog for a walk, hang out. And you can drive through there, but you just have to realize you're going to go slow. But one road over, you've got a good, quick car route that you can do that on. And I liked it. It was a little shock when I got off of those, but I think that it could work with education and signage and good design.
James, when you entered into it, what was the differentiator from one street to another? I mean, how did you know?
So, again, I didn't really understand how they did that. The locals knew, both literally just from living there, but they also knew the system they had. They knew, if you're going east-west and you go this one over, you're going to find a bike boulevard, right? But they had green markings on the road. A lot of them had like a big green square with a bike in the middle or a pedestrian. And then there was some diagonal striping where they indicated around corners where they didn't want you to park. There, they would park all the way around the corner, including like at a diagonal to the corner. So they were pretty big on getting rid of that and doing a lot of visual cues. Some of the buildings did have Bike Boulevard painted on the side as you entered that, but that was due to their signage system. Only on larger roads, think Lincoln, would they have a traditional street sign like we would see over the top of the road. A lot of the street, almost all of them, were plaques on the corners of buildings. And you'd have it about 10 feet in the air. You would have a black and blue plaque, said the name of the street. They'd usually give something else, the direction or the street numbers on that block.
I mean, that's interesting because this is a new concept, I think, in this region. And I know that Gabe had looked at a lot of areas, but I think this one location that Brandon mentioned on Main was, again, maybe a successful location to at least begin, and I think it's sort of like roundabouts. We don't know, maybe not as controversial, because I think where these would go, people would want those on their block. But if it can get in and maybe people can see it and experience it like you have, then maybe that lets it grow into other locations.
No, I agree, and particularly the system where they give motorists an outlet. It's really like giving everybody a little bit, where you live on that street. Okay, well, you take the fast road in your car. You take the fast road to the block, and you do 500 feet of slow driving. No big deal. If you're on a bike, you go another block over, and you got a nice, easy ride. And I really liked that system.
I guess to sort of flip that question around, do you have a sense, Craig, is the plan clear about how, for that little stretch of Maine, how it will be signed or set off so that it's clear at all that there's any sort of roadway priority difference? Or will it just kind of meld into the rest of West Maine, which is a bike route? And
I think because it is a plan, it just mentions that as a location. We would
Yeah.
have to get into the details or the weeds later. But I think, we'd want to do it consistent with how other bike boulevards that are successful are done. But, some type of indicator that, hey, this is different. And you shouldn't be zipping down through here, if you're in a car.
Yeah.
Where we struggle, I think, when we look at the rest of the city is where are other places that could be
Yeah.
done. But I think with a lot of these things, once we begin to implement one, and maybe that can sort of grow from there. So I think it's sort of like putting the toe in the water, so to speak. That may not be as aggressive as some want to do, but I think we ought to be cautious, just because we don't want to put something in and then have to take it back out.
Yeah.
Either. We want it to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. I kind of wondered if one option would be to extend that bike boulevard concept further east along Maine. You could take it the whole way to Lincoln, or you could take it further than Lincoln the whole way to Strawberry Fields or whatever, where Maine ends and
Mhm.
splits off from University. All of that part of Main Street is low traffic, residential, pretty quiet, and sort of a candidate in my mind for, it doesn't get a lot of traffic other than people who are commuting by bike or car or walking from all the apartments that are along there, west into campus often. But that would be a lot up to the neighbors once it gets into those residential blocks. With the people on West Main Street and that historic stretch of West Main that has so many old, beautiful kind of Victorian homes, would they be interested at all in being part of a bike boulevard if we try it in a little couple blocks and then say, well, you know what, if you like how we kind of slowed the traffic down over there and you want to extend that into your section of Maine, we could. And yeah, you could start it in the small stretch closest to campus, and then if people like it, consider extending it. But
And I think that's a good point. One of our future resurfacing projects is Springfield and Lincoln in that zone, and with that, the challenge is the crossing at Maine.
mm-hmm.
And we're going to try to figure out something there to make that better for bicyclists to cross, because it's really not good right now. But adding in the boulevard thing, maybe if we start out on the west and we see how it works, and then it can grow.
Yeah.
From there, it's something to consider.
Yeah.
Oh.
Other thoughts, Elsie?
Yeah, I think the West Main area that you're, proposing possibly for the future would be a great candidate for that. I work right over there in the Phillips Recreation Center, and it is already kind of a quiet, like very bicycle heavy area, not a lot of cars. So I think it would be a good candidate for that in the future.
I agree, and the place I think that the boulevards would really succeed, both as far as planning and design, but as well as community involvement, is in new developments. Because when you go into a community and say, hey, we're going to make this huge change,
Right.
there's a lot of disagreements and contention. But if we get a new community development come in, and they say, hey, we want to do this, we can propose that, and then when you buy your house what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think it would be an attraction for a lot of people, but then you don't have that. You pull the rug out from under me.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think this is all good discussion. I'm not sure if we'll be able to incorporate in the master plan, but I think it's something that, we have some planners here, we have engineering here, so I think it's something that we can begin to further look into, in time.
Yeah, I want to chime in here for a sec. That stretch of Maine, basically all the way from downtown going across Lincoln west. I think that's a prime spot, as we've all been talking about, for more study. When Steve Clark from the League of American Bicyclists was out, me and Jeff Yockey and Cynthia and I think Charlie went out with him on a ride, and we looked specifically at the crossing at Maine and Lincoln, and we discussed ways that we could engineer that better. So we got some good ideas, so we can, Craig and I can kick those around in the future. I also wanted to say I agree with Sue about the language that we use. I was going to make a comment. I made a lot of comments on earlier drafts of the plan, and I wanted to say I don't think we should use the term bike boulevard. I do like other places where they call them neighborhood greenways or whatever, because calling it a bike boulevard is then I really don't like that language. I do think it's just a street where you're prioritizing people, and I actually think that concept would work in a lot of older, quiet residential areas. I think people would probably love it, but it is about how you pitch the concept and then do some test cases and actually see if they work.
Yeah.
But who wouldn't want to live on a street where your kids can actually go out and play in the street and not have to worry about getting hit by cars?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how we could serve it, maybe, find out what people think about it. I know there's a guy I was just, he caught up to me when I was riding down Main Street, and he lived at Main and Kohler, and you know, was clearly a biking guy, and he just wondered if any drivers ever stopped at the stop sign at Main and Kohler, and,
Yeah.
and why the pavement was so crappy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think those are, the comments about the name especially is maybe one we should ask
Yeah.
Gabe and the group for some specific feedback on.
Yeah, I think
And-
that's easy. We can
Yeah,
change that.
yeah,
I'll offer that one up.
yeah, okay.
The
Yeah,
pavement, I can't do anything
The
about it.
pavement, yeah.
We'll try.
Get out your checkbooks.
if the pavement's really bad, cars don't want to drive on it.
Right. Well, we actually find that with the brick streets.
Yeah.
There's actually, I've done speed studies, and we get 3 to 4 to 5 mile an hour less on brick streets than we do on regular
Huh.
streets. So,
Yeah.
that was really all that, the main points that I had.
Yeah, any other questions from commission members or things? Basically, next month, this would be back with some more of these answers, any final public input we'd received, and a chance then for us to make our final comments and take an official vote on, like, do we recommend approving this? And then our recommendation goes along with all the others to city council. But is there anything else we want staff to ask about or come back with some answers on? No? Okay. Well, thank you. This almost 400 page thing was a ton of work by Gabe and others as well, but, thanks for-
Mainly Gabe, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's impressive. I mean, he spent a lot of time on that.
he should get like an honorary PhD or
There
something.
you go,
for-
yes.
yeah. Okay, any final comments then on this before we move on? Okay, great. And do tell people they can still submit comments through February 1st. I think you can find it real easy from the Urbana City website. If you just go to the bike plan page, right there, it has a link to the county site where you can see the document and submit comments digitally. Okay, then we will go on. We have no other new business. Are there any announcements? I know it's a little cold outside, but upcoming
I've got
events?
one.
Yeah.
Savoy, one of our neighbors, has started their bike and pedestrian plan process. So they have a upcoming public workshop on Thursday, February 4th at their recreation center from 6 to 8 p.m. So I just wanted to note that.
That's great. And I think that went out electronically too. Yeah, good.
I have an announcement. We started planning for Bike Month already. We had a small meeting over at MTD last week to kick off the planning for Bike Month meeting. And I think Jeff Yaki at Champaign County Bikes is going to be expanding the group that is involved in that, but he wanted to get a tiny group together, a manageable group together, just to kick off the planning for that. So more planning to come.
Okay. Bike month is May, right?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone interested can talk to you for more details, right? Like the committee's always willing to have more volunteers and, okay. Okay, any other announcements? Okay, are there any future agenda topics? I know Craig was saying bylaws and this document again for next month and other things, but is there any topics commission members want to request for the future?
And it would be helpful if maybe commission members thought of, we could always ask a guest speaker to come and talk about a topic if something interests them. One thing that I was just thinking after we've all talked here, maybe it would be a good idea if we had somebody from the police department or the U of I police department come and talk about the laws and, and things like that. And that might be a good future topic.
Yeah, that would be great. I think it's been a few years at least since the police came to a commission meeting and we talked a while back about the diversion program, the ticket diversion program, but that's been quite a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
We can thank James for that. Good idea.
Good. Any other suggestions? Okay, well, you can always email staff or me as well. So with that, that is the end of tonight's agenda. I know it's a little after 8 o'clock here. Any final comments before we adjourn? Okay, then I will declare this meeting of the Bike and Ped Advisory Commission adjourned. Thank you very much. Good evening.